All anyone ever wants for Christmas is for Arc System Works to make a fighting game for one of their favorite intellectual properties. And today, December 26th, 2020, it actually happened. During their winter festival today, Neople, creators of the video game Dungeon Fighter Online, announced a brand new traditional 2D fighting game made in cooperation with Aiding and Arc System Works, using the world and characters of Dungeon and Fighter, or better known in the West as Dungeon Fighter Online. I understand many of you may have little awareness as to the game, and it's primarily popular in Korea and China. However, it is released worldwide, including a Japanese and English localization. It is free to play and will run on just about any PC and or refrigerator. It's a 2.5D side-scrolling beat-em-up in the vein of Streets of Rage or River City Rampage or The Simpsons arcade game. Well, at least it was originally, and now it's kind of different. It's also the 35th biggest intellectual property in the world, having made $15 billion and with 700 million people who have played the game. That means it's bigger than Sailor Moon, or World of Warcraft, or The Avengers. All of that, and it's only ever been on the PC. Any attempts at broadening the scope of the IP have been, well, a bit hit or miss, let's say. I don't hate Slap Up Party, really. Now, it's mostly a massive MMO that you can sink all your time and money into to dress up your lolly like Groucho Marx in a penguin suit. However, that all said, the character design, world building, large money bags of Neople, and how ridiculously well known the IP is in Korea and China make it the perfect game to be used in the latest Arcsys fighter. And adapt it perfectly they have. DFO's 1v1 PvP is pretty much already a perfected fighting game, so it translates pretty easily, all things considered, but I just want to show you the attention to detail here. This is my Inquisitor. This is my Inquisitor using Death by Burning, her first awakening. Now, here's the same attack in DFO Duel. Can we talk about how good this animation looks? The spin and the axe plan? Oh! Now, for those of you who are a bit more familiar with DFO than you are with fighting games, maybe it'd be better to mention the presumed heavy lifter on the development. Aiding are mercenaries of the highest caliber in the video game world. The fighting game community respects them for their work on things such as Bloody Roar, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, the Fate fighting game back on the PS2, and Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So seriously, absolutely everything about the initial announcement of this game looks fantastic. So I wanted to go over a bit of a breakdown of the trailer, but also ask what could potentially go wrong. I mean, the first and obvious question, and as of the making of this video, Arcsys hasn't commented at all officially on this, the sink or swim moment is rollback netcode. With their latest release of Granblue Fantasy Versus and Dragon Ball FighterZ, they neglected to include rollback netcode, and it really killed the game, not the least of which because we're in a global pandemic and nobody can go play in person. Hopefully circumstances aren't the same when DFO Duel releases. However, the rollback netcode is still a very integral part of any fighting game released in 2021. Arcsys announced Guilty Gear Strive will include rollback netcode a while ago, and we're waiting to see that. And it very much is the standard for all fighting games post-2020. I suppose until we get any word on this, we'll have to trust that both Arcsys and Aiding, both of whom have a relatively fantastic track record of not having their heads up their asses too far, will understand and come through in the end. My second question here is the localization. Now, presumably Arcsys would be publishing this, and they really haven't disappointed as a publisher in the past. Granblue released in North America about only a month after Asia. This game would indeed require Chinese and Korean localization. However, the sound files for all the characters are already recorded and very easily accessible, so I would have to think that wouldn't be too much of an issue, unless a bunch of new dialogue needs to be recorded. A minor thing, but but there is no official English dub voices for any of the characters since Nexon North America crashed DFO into the ground back in 2013, but I'd imagine Arcsys or Aiding would have an English release, at least text-wise, in scope all the same. For what it's worth, the English name of the game should be localized as Dungeon Fighter Online Duel or DFO Duel and not DNF Duel, something you'll see or might cause problems when you're searching for information related to the game. Next big question is platforms. Now, consider that Neople, the creators of Dungeon Fighter Online, likely paid for most of the development here, or a substantial enough amount. It's not like they don't have the cash. DFO is biggest in Korea and China, so the market there is much more PC-based, so a PC release would be beyond confirmed here. If Aiding is developing, they should have free reign to port it to everything, honestly. Even DFO was ported to the Xbox. You remember that one, true fans? Yeah, that was wild. What's more, we got confirmation that it's being developed in Unreal, and games in that engine are on all systems, with even indie developers, and not really having too much of a problem with it. There's no legal or monetary reason this game should be limited in its platform selection. And what's more, Aiding is familiar with all consoles, including the Switch, having just worked on Pikmin 3 Deluxe. I would expect something like the releases of BlazBlue Cross Tag or Dragon Ball FighterZ for platforms. That all out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty here. Let's go over the information contained in the trailer and the confirmed characters and see what it tells us a bit about the game. First of all, the trailer only shows one subclass for each class, and it's far more likely that we'll see one of each class before two subclasses of the same class. Now, if I said class too many times or you don't understand any of that, just bear with me. The reason DFO has classes and subclasses is primarily for cosmetics. Character customization workload is much easier when four subclasses can share the same cosmetic look. However, what we see in DFO Duel is that each character is using the default outfit of their subclass. So while we can't rule out different looks or costumes, possible female mage bobblehead DLC, it would appear that each class is using the subclass's look from the official artwork or the Awakened One's avatar sets. With all that said, we have confirmed for the male Slayer the Berserker class. This is kind of like a Ragna Soul vibe with Bloody Twister command grab. It's very likely to retain the gimmick of being low on health and dealing more damage. For the male fighter, we have the male grappler. We get shown an air grab, just like he has many of in the game. The playstyle is very obvious, right? But it'll be likely that he'll have more mobility than a simple Zangief mold grappler would. Male ranger for the male gunner. It's, of course, the most melee of gunners, and we see his various kicks and short-range blasts, so I wouldn't really expect him to be the zoner like a launcher would, but more in the vibe of a Noelle from BlazBlue. The female fighter is a very interesting one because it looks like they've gone with female striker, and we see what is presumably either Tiger's Rush or a muscle shift cancel, which absolutely makes sense for the most aggressive class in the game. I would also expect super armor on her in some way, very Squirrel Rushdown vibes. And now we come to the thing that made me make this video because it is by far the most hype. For the Inquisitor, we only see death by burning and a non-ignited infernal vortex that looks suspiciously like Ruby Rose's Buzzsaw Blast. I bet that she'll be slower, but be able to extend combos either using Essence or Purifying Flames in exchange for probably meter or whatever mechanics this game has. Maybe even there's a Holy Fire stance chains on a couple of her attacks. That's all we have so far, but as for the classes we have not seen, we'd need to give each class a subclass, or we could guess at which subclass they're going to pick for each class. Now, there are 14 regular classes in the game currently, so we would expect that somewhere around the starting roster, with probably more subclasses as DLC. However, in all fairness, they could start with fewer than 14 classes, and then add them in as DLC very quickly in the first year. I would expect people feel like the Agent, Lancer, and Knight might be saved, omitted from the roster. I mean, just like they were for their Third Awakenings. Get wrecked. For the male mage, I'm going to guess either Dimension Walker or Elemental Bomber here, though Glacial Master also has a good argument. It depends if they want to use male mage as what I presume will be the only puppet character on the roster, with Gnarly of course. Now they could use the Necromancer from the Thief class instead, so if male mage is not given the puppet character and it lands on Thief, then Elemental Bomber becomes the primary go-to. If they use Dimension Walker for the male mage, I'm not expecting Rogue or Shadow Dancer considering how many kind of quick in-your-face characters have been shown already, so maybe Kunoichi. For the female mage, you know deep in my heart that we need the Witch. Even if it's not in the base game, I would fully expect the Witch to come as DLC because she is by far the most popular subclass. And no, I don't have a source for that, and yes, I am biased. In the game, she would have an air dash and traps and a unique identity. So far, they've chosen classes that really fit into general roles in a fighting game. So if we don't see a zoner out of the female gunner or male mage classes, it'll likely be up to the female mage to break out the elementalist, which would be a disappointing scenario to say the least. That in mind, I'll go on record saying I'm predicting launcher for female gunner. I really don't think battle mage or summoner would translate all that well, but maybe they could work. Female Slayers generally play the same or similar enough that they could really use any of them, but I really like the idea of a whip sword from the Demon Slayer because it gives you the Ivy vibes. There was also a whip character in Grand Blue Fantasy, so it really stands out above the other two. Male Priest, you really want to go with either the Monk or the Avenger. I think a Demon Stance change mechanic with a Scythe in the base form would be super fun, but a Monk is a Monk, and that's DFO PvP through and through, so I would put all my money on the Monk and his hypermobility and dodges and weaves. But aren't you just reskinning Akihiko at that point? Skirmisher gets my pick for a Lancer, as his air-based moves would give some much-needed Y-axis to a game that is already looking to be very ground-heavy if Witch isn't in. The others don't make very good cases either. For Knight, I would have to give it to the Pegapony Princess. Chain Rush and how easily all the attacks and animations would translate directly right to 2D seems like a winner, though Dragon Knight, I guess, could be a dark horse. I don't know anything about Agent, nobody plays Agent. There's also the idea that NPCs could be playable, GSD as a final boss maybe, someone in the Witch Discord floated Lenny training dummy. I would have to imagine that they would stick with all the subclasses primarily first. There's just so much other content you could draw from too. We've only seen Sky Tower as the stage so far, but you could do a million of them, from Behemoth, from Susha's Tavern, obviously, that needs to be in, Pandemonium Times Square. I could just go straight down a list. And so too with the music, right? We only hear the first track here, and it seems to be one of those promo tracks that Neople will just put behind their promo vids that aren't actually in the game. At least as far as I could tell, it's not a song from the game. However, that doesn't mean that DFO's music is not worth celebrating. It absolutely is. That's really for the true fans, but anyone who has spent the amount of time with DFO that I have will recognize the game's long and elaborate history of various themes going from operatic to shredding, overdriven guitars. The music is always a highlight of the game and new content, and if the remixes and original tracks pulled from other games have been any indication, we may see something really great out of this OST. I just really want Wind of View on the title screen character select. So I am beyond hyped for this. It was the Christmas present I did not expect, and everything that we've seen so far has led me to think that it's going to be an absolutely fantastic experience for DFO fans and fighting game fans in general. So when are we looking forward to this game? Well, there's only 5 characters and 1 stage shown in this announcement trailer. This is purely a shot in the dark, but I would expect 10 or so characters made by this summer, and then a release anywhere from October 2021 to the summer of 2022, maybe around Evo time. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you're as excited about it as I am. Don't know that I'll be doing any type of updates or anything. This channel really isn't about that, but I felt persuaded by the spirit of the Inquisitor to come and record this video immediately because it is so hype. I honestly cannot believe this is real. If you want to come say hi, stop by the Witches Discord or the DNF Duel Discord, which has just been created today. I will leave links in the description, and I will return this channel to its regularly scheduled anime breakdown programming.